Welcome back to the Mortal Realms Wargamers, and today we're going to talk about one of the coolest heroes that I just don't think we see enough of. Aventis Firestrike is one of those odd new heroes we got with our current Stormcast Eternals book, where there's not really much of an associated novel or story or a large campaign, nothing like that. It was a hero that came out of nowhere, and all the lore that we have about him is pretty much on one page in a battle tome. I'll be honest, I kind of skimmed past him when I was doing my Stormcast Eternal week, not because he wasn't cool looking, I just assumed that there would be something that included him more and I'd wait, to cover him later. But as I was scanning the battle tomes for lore topics, I took a deeper look at his entry, and man, it is cool. It is short for sure, but it is a really cool story. He was born Aventis Firestrike in the realm of fire, Akshi. He was raised in a society that focused heavily on the study and discipline of magic, a somewhat primitive culture that desperately revered the mastery of fire magic in particular. During the Age of Myth, his people encountered the first of the Blood God's army. Khorne had come to the realm of Akshi in force, right at the start of the Age of Chaos, and was tearing through the land. The origins of Khorne's story can be read in the book Red Feast, and the idea is that this warband of blood god followers just kind of poured out all over Ashy, and this was one of the small tribes that they encountered early on. Firesun's people stood in strict opposition to the bloodbound hordes, seeing clearly the corruptive nature of chaos. These aren't just, nomadic tribes or anything like that. This is something different. So his people unleashed their devastating fire magics upon Khorne's armies, riling the god himself to fury. Curses of Khorne were showered upon the battlefield, leaving very few of Firesun's people alive and fleeing. Now at this point, Aventis fled back to his village and dedicated his life to purging the Khorne warbands. He's set apart because he understood something, right? Where other leaders within his community were assuming that these were crazed hordes of just madmen roaming randomly, unable to string together complex military campaigns. Well, the truth is that's a very arrogant thought, but Aventis knew better. He understood that even though this looks like a crazy tide of lunatics, that every mighty lord of Khorne is a shrewd and cunning leader, right? The insanity of Blood Reavers and stuff is kind of an illusion. I mean, they really are crazy, but they are hiding a deadly intellect under the surface. He treated them like a proper enemy, and it showed in his effectiveness. Now, over several years, Aventis Firestrike fought raiding parties and wandering hordes, becoming the bane of Khorne's mortal armies here in Akshi. He earned the nickname Fire Soul amongst the Bloodbound. He could appear, trench a battlefield in flames, and kind of retreat into the smoke. It was returning from one of these raids that Aventis saw a plume of smoke rising from his home, and he went into a mad dash to rescue his people. The Bloodbound had enough, right? They were hunting the hunter, finding his village while he was away, tearing down defensive structures and towers. Khorne's armies set his home to the torch. Now at this point, Aventis makes it home and sees everything that his people cherish turned to ash, and upon seeing it, Aventis decides to turn things to 11. He goes and gets an item called the Ever-Burning Coal, which was an artifact that his people revered. Of course, they are, people who study magic and magical properties and things. And basically, it's a sphere of pure realmstone, solidified fire magic from its housing. I assume an equivalent would be, he ran to the local church and then grabbed an artifact. He then took this piece of raw fire magic and consumed it whole. It was an agonizing process. It transmuted Aventis into a form of living flame before he passed out, awakening later back as a human. When he was conscious, he found himself immune to fire, and the burning in his chest, presumably, pure fire magic within him, could be channeled through his body. He had become a living weapon of fire magics, and the time to avenge his people had come. At this point, he takes the fight over to the Bloodbound for a final showdown, consuming this realmstone and walking right into a Khorne army. This is he and his people really just going out with a bang, right? He's kind of the last of them, and he took, like I said, he went, Super Saiyan, turned it all to 11. He's just walking straight into an army. The path of devastation that he carved is hard to imagine. Like a twisting tornado of flames, he swept through the Khorne forces, obliterating everything around him. It wasn't until a group of headhunters got the drop on him by leaping from a rooftop that Aventis was felled. And while he did die, this has to be one of the coolest deaths in all of Age of Sigmar. This grandiose display of power and loss and hatred towards chaos did not go unnoticed. Sigmar himself felt the quickening of fire magic and gazed upon Firesun, scooping up his soul to be reforged. Now, here's the thing, my understanding is that Aventis Firesun was born in the Age of Myth, right in that weird space between the Age of Myth and the Age of Chaos, where it's kind of like chaos was pouring in, but it wasn't quite the Battle of the Burning Skies, where it was like a definitive chaos is in control. We don't really know when he finally died, and how this fits into the bigger Age of Sigmar timeline. My point being, he could very well be one of the earlier souls that Sigmar scooped up, his Stormcast Eternal plans still a deep secret. In recognition of his mastery over magic and willingness to suffer its curse and pain to avenge his people, Sigmar remade Aventis Firesun as Aventis Firestrike, Lord Arcanum. And I assume that he worked in the background for a long time, because from what we know about the Sacrosanct Chamber, they existed from the start, but were largely kept hidden until the Necroquake. At that point, the Sacrosanct Chamber was unleashed in force, and the devastating magics of Firestrike would be sorely needed to counteract a new threat around the realm, specifically the Nighthaunt, right? His magics being far more effective at clearing out Nagash's minions than the basic, sword and shield formations that Sigmar had been using up to this point. Sending Firestrike back to his home in the realm of Akshi, Aventis has amassed great power and respect in the city of Hammerhall Aksha, becoming known as its Magistar. And he wields an artifact known as the Staff of Hammerhall. And from here, he plots his continuous crusade against the Blood God's horde, spending his new eternity as a Stormcast Eternal the same way that he did with his mortal life, defending the innocent, destroying Khorne's forces. Now, to aid him in this, he bonded with a like-minded creature named Lothar, a huge Taurolon that allows him to move and dispense justice very swiftly, raining down fire on all of his enemies. Let's talk about why is this cool. First of all, I don't know why I passed up this guy so often. He is such a cool person. His mortal death story is epic, right? For a few reasons. One, just compared to other ones, we look at stuff like Vandis Hammerhand or Garda Steel Soul, they had meaningful stories when they were alive. Vandis was a fighter who, went toe-to-toe with Khorne when he ran through. Gardas was a healer, and the Nurgle swept through his village. But this is one of the few stories where it's no, we hear about Stormcast that may have died, in a blaze of glory, but this is the blaziest of glory that I think I can recount off the top of my head. He imbued himself with an unstable resource, the Realm Stone of Akshi, went Super Saiyan, turned into fire, but then he was able, through his willpower, to become one with it, which eventually, I don't know if he would have eventually burned out and died or something like that. That's an interesting concept I'd like to explore, but the fact of the matter is he made the ultimate sacrifice just for vengeance, and I think that is so stinking cool. Furthermore, I want to know more about these small tribes of wizards, right? Because they're great short story fodder, right? As I think about what are some narrative threads that could be pulled to give us a sense of what the realms were like before the Age of Chaos. So we have the Red Feast that shows Khorne forces bursting into Akshi in mass. But at the same time, I'd love to see from that same time period other people who are, maybe they have a vague recollection of the gods, maybe some light worship, that kind of stuff, but they're just people living their lives with their own stuff, and they see chaos now for the first time, right? I want that, and how they figure out that it's not just some lunatic warband, but it's actually something malevolent behind it. I want to see them kind of figure things out along with us. And that would be a great short story for the past, but honestly, I'd take one for the present because I want to know more about him, right? What's his role in Hammerhall? Is he the mayor or something? How does that look in the day-to-day citizens and city leaders. What was his time like in Azir before the Sacrosanct Chamber was revealed? What was he doing? I'm very curious about this. You know, I don't need like a huge novel or anything like that, but I just want to know some more details to get a sense of like where his priorities are, where his focus has been this whole time, and what he's good at. He's a cool hero, definitely deserves a few more words devoted to him in any book that they put out. So tell me your thoughts on Aventis Firestrike. I've never actually seen him used in the game. In fact, I don't think I've really ever seen the Toralon kit on the table. If someone smarter than me about Age of Sigmar or the gameplay could tell me why, I'd love to hear about it, but honestly, he's a fantastic looking model, and if you are building a Hammerhall army for cities, or you want to have obviously your Stormcast Eternal army, he's a really cool model to take. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you in my next AOS lore video. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.